Ole Miss will blast the Washington State Cougars. We have the answer key before Saturday's test.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we'll start with my official prediction towards the end of the broadcast, which has changed a little since yesterday, and I will explain exactly why. We'll also dive into a few prop bets that stand out heading into this matchup, including which Rebel player could absolutely break out and make a difference on Saturday. Next, we'll ask the big question: is this the game that the Ole Miss defense finally generates explosive plays? And just how much can they affect Zevi Eckhouse and the Washington State offense? But first, we're going to talk about the biggest advantage that Ole Miss has going into this matchup: Kewan Lacy attacking the edges of the Washington State defense. His versatility and power could be a big difference maker in this one. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every single detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned for later in the show for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. It's a weird thing. I did the rounds and did a couple of Washington State podcasts yesterday, and I was kind of floating in my head around 38-17, 35-17. And after those podcasts got done, I started digging into some more of the advanced analytics and things like that. And I changed my prediction, which I'm going to give that in the third segment, but that prediction has changed. And the reason that I've made these changes are the apparent weaknesses of the Washington State defense. I get what Lane Kiffin said earlier in the week about in the 3 wins, they're only giving up 9 points a game. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's true. But they scored 13 points and gave up 10 points against FCS Idaho. They beat Colorado State 20-3. Colorado State's a really bad program. They did take down in a home game San Diego State, which is a pretty good team. That's a pretty good win for Jimmy Rogers' squad up in Pullman, Washington. But whenever you look at the advanced analytics of this Washington State defense, they are 111th or something like that in stop rate nationally. There's only 130-something teams in college football. But what that means is stop rate is the number of times during a game you actually force the team to punt or you get a turnover, anything that doesn't result in scoring. They're giving up an average of 3 points per drive this season. Remember, we're 5 games in at this point. There's a decent enough sample size for that. To put that in perspective, Pete Golding's Ole Miss defense is giving up a little over 1 point per drive, and that is in the top 30. And even with Washington State being very good throwing the ball, which they are, you can just look at these stats and realize that if they could just run the ball a little bit, they could be a dynamic offense. 18 receivers have caught passes this season. All of the concepts that were brought in by Ben Arbuckle and drilled into those Washington State players, they obviously remembered some of it. And now Jimmy Rogers is kind of taking advantage of that. But they don't run the ball particularly well. Defensively, they have one of the highest completion percentages allowed. And on the run game, it's problematic. There's way too many missed tackles. They've been kind of soft on the edge. They're only giving up about 170 yards a game rushing the ball. But against Washington, and this is important to realize, and this is why I think Kewan Lacy has a chance to really break out on Saturday. Jonah Coleman and Washington completely took apart Washington State. You had Damon Williams. He went like 18 of 19 or 17 of 19 or some ridiculous completion percentage, threw for nearly 300 yards, threw for 4 touchdowns, ran for another, en route to 59 points. But none of that's the impressive thing that Washington did. Washington had 52 total plays in that game. 52. They gained nearly 480 yards of total offense, nearly 10 yards per play, if my Simpson County math is correct. It was explosive play after explosive play after explosive play, and a lot of that was running the ball, attacking the edges of the defenses. On the inside, they got some pass rushing guys. They can get to the quarterback. They have some talented players that were recruited to be Pac-12 players before the Pac-12 was basically destroyed by the Big Ten. But on the edges of that defense, running counter, running outside zone, the jet sweep is going to be a major weapon on Saturday. That is the key for this game to being out of reach early. It's not throwing the ball and putting the ball at risk. It's just running the ball down Washington State's throat. And Kewan Lacy is one of the leaders in the country in missed tackles forced. Washington State has had trouble tackling over the course of this season. We mentioned they give up over 3 points per drive through 5 games. They've given up 59 points twice. And the only team that had comparable athletes to what Washington State is going to see on Saturday is Washington. And through 52 plays, they average nearly 10 yards per play. This Ole Miss team should systematically be able to take apart this Washington State team. This is a big talent gap. There's a lot of players that transferred up from South Dakota State to Washington State to play for Jimmy Rogers. They're going to be good. Don't get me wrong. Washington State is going to have a good football program very soon. This year, it's just a little bit clunky. You have an FCS team, a really good FCS team, that is having to compete at the Division I FBS level. And they took apart San Diego State. They took apart Colorado State. They beat Idaho. They have had success. But when they went on the road down to Texas, there was the disaster first half that led to Jackson Potter getting benched en route to a North Texas 59-10 win. It was a disaster. It was like 42-3 at halftime. It was really, really bad. And then right off of that, you have to go back and play the Apple Cup. And the Apple Cup, we all know, because the Apple Cup is their Egg Bowl. They're going to be up on that game. They're going to be extremely focused in that game. All of the excuses that happen from time to time around other games doesn't happen in that one. They scored 35 points. It was their best game scoring the football. They had 35 minutes of time of possession, kept Washington off the field. I think they're going to try to do that to Ole Miss as well. But 10 yards per play, 3 points per drive this season, and one of the highest completion percentages against by a secondary nationally. This is not a good matchup for Washington State. And I think Jimmy Rogers and everybody knows that. As long as Ole Miss doesn't turn the ball over, commit stupid penalties, and overall just kind of play sloppy, this is a game they can't lose. And that is why they are favored by 32.5 points. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Again, all the respect for Washington State. What the Big Ten did to Oregon State and Washington State is reprehensible. You will always have my respect for that. This was just a bad matchup, in my opinion. And we'll see exactly how that goes on Saturday. All right, this feels like a game that the Ole Miss defense needs to kind of explode. And honestly, this might be the perfect setup for it. With Georgia looming on the horizon next week, this is the moment for Pete Golding's unit to build confidence, force turnovers, and start stacking big plays defensively. Ole Miss has been close to breaking out defensively all year long, Pressure up front, improved tackling, flashes of dominance, but now they need it all to click. They need everything to start coming together. If this group can generate chaos and momentum this week, it completely change how the Rebels enter Atlanta or Athens, if we're being honest about it. We'll talk about why this could be the breakout game for the defense and what to watch for coming up next. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more time every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it all down. For Florida, Dallas Wilson had a big day. This is obviously an Ole Miss bye week, so we had to pick somebody else. He completely bullied the cornerback from Texas en route to his second touchdown, and when the pressure was on, he came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance was a surprise, but Dallas Wilson might be starting a streak. And just like Dallas Wilson delivered for the future Ole Miss opponent Florida Gators, DoorDash is delivering for your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save on every Saturday you order, stack it up all season long, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. And order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period runs through November 18th. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win that bet. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little bit of action riding on the game. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video down below. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but keeps all of this free. If you want more, join the Insiders program in the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way ever to cancel. So give that a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. Really good stuff. Now, this is an interesting game, and I talked all week how this is a trap. And if you ever want to know the excitement around the football game from the fan base, just come in and check my views. They go up, they ebb and flow just like everything else, but they are a nice mirror of the fan base. And this is a game where it's a little bit depressed as far as the views being pushed down. Next week is the game in Georgia. The week after that's in Norman, Oklahoma. It's going to have a lot of views. It's going to be very exciting. But it isn't quite there for this one. So Ole Miss is going to be tasked with getting through this game. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Heck, we're halfway through the season. I'm not going to ever be one to throw away a college football game as not important or anything like that. But this is a game to get everything where you need it before you hit that stretch. This is the last game that you have to tune up and get everything clicking on the right level before you go to Athens and before you go to Norman. Granted, if you lost this game against Washington State, it wouldn't necessarily matter if Norman or Athens, Georgia, but you have the opportunity to get right in this game. And what I mean by that is the explosive play percentage needs to get right. There needs to be more sacks. There needs to be more tackles for loss, interceptions, things like that. This has not been an explosive defense to this point. Now, they've been a good defense as far as the one thing that's important, and that's giving up a low amount of points. But compared to the 2024 defense, this has not been an explosive defense. Looking at the stats through 5 games, Ole Miss has 5 sacks on the year. To put this in perspective, Ole Miss led the nation a year ago in sacks, getting somewhere around 55 or 60 sacks over the course of the season. 5 sacks for the Ole Miss Rebels this year. Now, that's not necessarily them not getting to the quarterback, because there's several players that have a decent number of quarterback hurries or pressures, and they just haven't gotten the sack yet. And with Garrett Nussmeier, there was a couple of times where they tackled him and he fell across the line of scrimmage where it would have been a sack behind, ended up landing for like a half-yard gain. But 5 sacks through 5 games, that's not quite right. TFLs, those numbers need to tick up as well. Jaden Yates, you start to see his numbers improve. Cam Franklin is living in the backfield right now, and Xavier Harris and Will Eccles, they're coming along very nicely as well. But tackles for loss needs to tick up as well. Through 5 games, they're averaging less than 4 tackles for loss per game. That's not going to cut the mustard after what we saw a year ago. Like I said, the scoring numbers isn't bad. If you look at the first half of the Arkansas game, to where they just couldn't stop the Hogs, other than that, they've been pretty good. So the explosive plays are the only thing that I am looking for as far as an improvement metric of it. Because when you look at it, last year they gave up 30% on third down. The third down conversion percentage was 30%. This year it's 35%. So it's a little bit better. It's ticked up a little bit, but a 35% third down percentage, you're going to win more games than not. And that is also, again, with Arkansas completely taking apart the Ole Miss defense, especially in the first half. They were converting third down after third down after third down. That percentage is up because of that game. It's going to be very interesting to see exactly how it plays out. This Ole Miss defense is really good. And I said before the season that this Ole Miss team is going to go as far as the front 7 will take them. And as they're getting better over the course of the season, they are genuinely getting better, it gives you hope going into those road environments, because it's nice that you're getting 5 games out of 6 at home. That's good to get the feel goods up. If Ole Miss is 6-0 going to Athens, Georgia, everybody has all the vibes of being positive in the world. But the signs, the explosive plays. Listen, Washington State had 5 turnovers in the first half of the North Texas game. They've had 9 turnovers over the course of the last 3 games, and that includes North Texas, Washington, and Colorado State, who they dominate that Colorado State game, so they probably didn't turn the ball over there. Short fields have been catastrophic for Washington State. If you want this game to be over quickly, and that is a possibility of being over quickly, you probably need a turnover. You need an explosive or 2. You need to get up by 2 or 3 scores and just kind of throttle down a little bit and kind of coast to the finish line. If you can do that, that would be an ideal situation for the Ole Miss Rebels before the Georgia game, getting ready for that. Also, if you could possibly get Austin Simmons decent amount of reps in this game, that's a positive as well. Listen, Lane Kiffin wants to play the game to where, hey, we don't know who our quarterback is, so Kirby has to prepare for it. Fine, great. Get Austin Simmons those reps in this game. All right, here's the graphic I made about why Ole Miss is going to defeat Washington State. Kewan Lacy should be the dominant force against Washington State on Saturday, especially on the edges of the defense. And second, Washington State defensively is giving up 3 points per drive. And in the Apple Cup, Wazzu gave up 475 yards and only 52 plays at home. And the Huskies were 8 of 9 on third down. Those are all things that I mentioned to you earlier, but I wanted to put the graphic up because I spent time building it, if we're going to be completely honest about it. But it's a game. This is a game that Ole Miss should win. And because of those things that I just told you, my prediction of 35-17, my prediction of 38-17, whatever it was, has gone up. And it's pretty considerably gone up because those numbers are scary a little bit. Those numbers, you look at Jimmy Rogers and all of the players that came over, you can see that they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a well-coached team. If you create a dynasty in the FCS level, they're going to be good, which means they're going to have some excellent schemes offensively and defensively to try and slow Ole Miss down. But at the end of the day, this is a Jimmy's and a Joe's game. Not all of football. Everybody likes to just say Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's just as a blanket statement. That's not the case. But this game, it is the case. This game will be about the Jimmys and the Joes rather than the X's and the O's. And if you come out and you don't turn the ball over, you don't commit penalties, you are going to win this game going away just because you have a better team than the other team. That is the way it works. So we'll see how it happens. All right, in our final segment, it's time for our final thoughts on this game, our little picks on the game and props for this weekend matchup. We'll break down where Ole Miss stands heading into kickoff and what to expect schematically from both sides, how matchups might dictate the pace. Then we'll hit the FanDuel lines, our best bets, and a few player props to keep an eye on, including which Rebel could have the biggest impact on this Saturday. All of that and more coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, culture, keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is, well, Lane Kiffin going full coach speak to try and make sure his team doesn't overlook Washington State with Georgia next week after being a 33-point favorite. It's a serious thing, and it was a lot of work. But when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. So this game has a chance to be interesting, but not from the scoreboard fact to me. Again, I think this is the best passing offense that Ole Miss has played thus far this season. Don't give me LSU. Don't give me Arkansas. Don't give me any of that. Schematically, Arkansas has other stuff. Mike Washington is the key to that offense. Garrett Nussmeier, not at 100%. I don't care what anybody says. He's a little bit injured. Ole Miss played very well in that LSU game, but that LSU passing attack, that LSU offense just wasn't quite right. This Washington State passing offense, they have no run game. They've ran for a total of 500 yards this season. And if you take away 5 explosive runs, that's 20% of their run game gone. This Washington State run game has been abysmal over the course of this season. So I expect Ole Miss to do the drop 8 thing again. Dare Washington State to run the football. They have some good players at running back. They just don't seem to have the athletes up front at the moment to get a push, to generate that. So they're having to rely on their passing game. And schematically, they are good at getting people open from time to time. Now, they're so one-dimensional, they can't always do it because everybody eventually can pin their ears back and go get the quarterback. But Washington State is going to score some points. And that was the first step of my mind in come up with the prediction of this. You look at the betting lines as it sits right now. The betting line has gone down by a point. It's now almost favored by 32.5 points. The over-under is at 58.5. So that all makes me wonder about what's going on. Where's kind of the ballpark of that? Because I do think this betting line will be kind of that. Is going to be around that point total, especially when you look at Washington State giving up 3 points per drive over the course of the season. The fact that they're giving up large completion percentage to power teams that they see on the back end of that defense. Defensively, they are struggling at the moment. Offensively, they can't run the ball, which means they will eventually potentially become one-dimensional, which means that Suntarine Perkins and those guys can just go hunt. And if that happens, it's Katie bar the door. That's explosive plays. That's interceptions, pick sixes, 3rd and 17s. All of that is on the fingertips of Pete Golding. If he can get the explosive plays out of the defense, then honestly it needs to happen. Washington State is pretty good at pass pro. They're not good at run blocking. So we'll see how that looks for Ole Miss. Now, the game, I added 10 points to the Ole Miss side of the ledger. Ole Miss 48, Washington State 17. A lot of that, like I said, came from the fact that Washington State has given up 3 points per drive this season. Ole Miss, by comparison, has only given up 1 or so. And that tells me that Ole Miss should win this game by scoring 2 out of every 3 points. So if Washington State's going to score 17, Ole Miss is going to kind of be in that ballpark as well. I do not think Ole Miss covers. I think it's going to be just sloppy enough that they can't do it. I think there's some kind of a streak where Ole Miss is beaten G5 opponents in Oxford or something like that by 30 points. I think that comes to an end in this game. Washington State's a good program. They're going to get everything right. I like the hire of Jimmy Rogers. I guess you can tell that by my voice, but I think Ole Miss has a chance to do this. Now, if you look at props in this game, Kewan Lacy, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's kind of where my head is right now. I think Trinidad Chambliss is going to fall short of the 300 passing yards and 50 yards rushing in this game, which because he's not going to play the whole game. So the stats are not going to be there to be gotten. I think Austin Simmons is going to play this game, and I do think that Ole Miss will have a 3+ sack game against Zevi Eckhouse and the Washington State Cougars. We'll see exactly how that goes. Either way, I think Ole Miss is going to blast the Washington State Cougars and move on to the Georgia Bulldogs for the number 4 ranked Ole Miss Rebels. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Don't believe me? Google Ole Miss podcast and see how much we come up. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's completely free. Your support means the world to us. And another big moment for Locked On, college football fans. Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation, alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview show only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Hotty toddy, everyone, and remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.